is the Page Publishing Book Club. How you doing? I'm your host, Alice Stockton Rossini. As a program manager for the federal government, Ken Little wrote a lot of reports for Congress. He served in Vietnam, and when he realized he needed help dealing with his experiences there, he reached out to several social workers, and they all told him the same thing. He had to go back to his childhood and keep a journal to find the answers he was looking for. That journal became his book entitled Against All Odds.
We lived in a extremely poor rural area in North Carolina, and no running water, outdoor toilet, and things like that. I mean, you could look down through the floor and see chickens walking around underneath the house. One sunny day, my mother put on a coat. I mean, it was extremely hot, and she put on a coat, grabbed my hand, and we started walking down a country road. You know, I remember looking up and seeing the pine needles just wavering in the wind. And all of a sudden, she said to me, Ken, it's your damn fault that I had this nervous breakdown. You know, I broke out and I started crying. Tears were flowing profusely. And I was trying to figure out what I had done to cause my mother to have a nervous breakdown. And I encountered this abuse from her from childhood through adulthood. And one thing that stood out in my mind, she lived in New York while my father was away fighting in the infantry in Germany. And she met a man named Kenneth. And she would always talk about Kenneth behind my father's back and say, you know, I wish I had married Kenneth because Kenneth was a very smart man, unlike your daddy. And my father always had a standoffish relationship with me. And I concluded that he was not my real father. And to this very day, I'm trying to figure out who is my father. I'm 70 years old now, trying to figure out who is my father.
But she named you Ken.
She did. So you connected the dots there.
Oh my God, that's horrible though. You poor baby. It's a wonder you were successful at all.
She blamed me until she left this earth. But guess who had to make the decision to take her off life support? My daddy walked away because he had encountered so much turmoil and adultery with her until he just walked away. He looked at me and said, she's your mama, and walked away. And I had to make the decision to take her off life support because she had a massive stroke.
Oh, you poor thing.
Well, no, I'm a happy man these days because I did overcome all of that adversity. You know, I had to put up with verbal abuse, physical abuse, domestic abuse, and racism during the 50s and 60s. But I made up my mind that I was going to overcome and succeed and break this cycle that I grew up in. And I did, ma'am. I have two children, and my daughter has an MBA and she works for the federal government. My son has two bachelors and he has his own limousine business down in Atlanta, Georgia.
So you really are a success story.
Yes, ma'am.
And faith played a big role in it, didn't it?
Yes, a big role. I really hope and pray that my book encourages people of all backgrounds and ages who are exposed to a cycle of physical, verbal, and domestic abuse and racism stay the course in pursuing their dreams and vision. Do not give up. You can break that horrible cycle because I blew up in the blue collar community and people got mad because I didn't accept a blue collar job at Alcoa when I finished college. And most of the men in there could not read or write. It's not that I thought I was better than they were. I just wanted something bigger and better for my life and for my children. So after I finished undergraduate, I moved to Washington, D.C., and I attended the American University and earned a master's degree there. And I took a break, and eventually I went back to school to pursue another master's in education.
Wow, what a story.
I gave away a lot of copies to people who were really close to me so that they could put the word out because I found out the word of mouth is the best advertisement for anything.
Right.
And I also met a friend. They put me in contact with a retired school teacher and a place called the Heritage House and talked to people about your book. And I started from front to back. And when I looked around in the audience, I didn't see a dry eye in the place.
Wow.
One thing that stirred up a lot of emotion was when I told them while I was stationed in Vietnam. My mother wrote me a letter stating that I hope you get killed so I can collect the insurance money.
Oh,
That really stirred up a lot of emotion.
oh, God, I don't know how you got through that, but man, you are something else.
Only by the grace of God that I made it through. And I want to let other people know that if a country boy like me, a poor country boy like me, made it, you can too. But you got to extend your hand to God to look for his guidance and leadership. And I went on base a couple of weeks ago, Fort Meade, Maryland,
Hmm.
and I had a big poster up, and I sold about 24 books during the week, and I spent most of my time talking to people about their problems.
Yep.
And I'm glad I had the experience of dealing with social workers because they talked at length about what was going on with them, and they ended up buying books.
How about that? You really are an inspiration, though, Ken. Thank you so much. Marcus Byruk grew up in the Jewish ghetto on London's East End, but with determination and brain power. He graduated Oxford and went on to Silicon Valley, where he developed LexisNexis, which pioneered electronic access to legal and journalistic documents. At 41, he developed temporal lobe epilepsy, accompanied by a rare form of amnesia. In his book entitled Mind, Mood, and Memory, he details his decades long struggle with depression, anxiety, and frustration with psychiatry's over reliance on drugs that he says almost killed him. Marcus, you talk about how doctors linked your condition to a sports related childhood injury.
They said the cause of the epilepsy is a kick in the head that could have been kindling for 20 years. And there's a picture in the book of me with the rugby team, and you can see I look like the mascot compared to how big those other guys are. I loved sports, so I had a wonderful time playing, and I didn't give two thoughts to the idea that I might be, seriously injured one day, or, I was just a kid. My memories are being erased as we speak. And the doctors have never seen anything quite like it. And the smartest doctor I met said that psychological issues can become physical issues. So he said there are so many things that happened in your life. You had a very traumatic childhood, and I was identified at school as having a brilliant math brain.
I know your life is amazing. And then to kind of have this bomb dropped on you at 41, and then you go through the struggles with the drugs that the doctors are giving you.
Oh,
Did you just say, I'm not going to take these drugs anymore? Or what? How did you
well,
reconcile that?
I mean, I look back over all the drugs and I said, this is just crazy. They're all interacting with each other, and none of them have a real impact on my life. I was still getting depressed,
Hmm.
still losing memory, and it turned out I still had epilepsy.
So they were just, you were
Because,
like a guinea pig.
yes, you got it. I presented a very kind of unique case to the clinical world.
Nobody
No,
understands this kind of
no,
epilepsy,
no.
really,
The only way they're going to understand it,
is when you
um,
die.
I'm afraid.
Huh,
And even then, I'm not sure, but I've certainly said you're allowed to go in and experiment or do whatever with my brain if it helps future generations.
sure.
Some people have said maybe we could look at the inside of your brain now, and of course I said no, let's not. So doctors have come up with speculation about, when I suddenly discovered memories were going, they came up with all sorts of different theories, but it didn't matter because nothing they did or any medication they gave me changed that pattern that I was seeing of losing memories. And, in the book it says they told me to strengthen my memories by reliving them. If I had dinner with somebody, I should record it, and then I should go back to all of the records I made, and I wouldn't recall it.
Oh, geez, Marcus, so tragic, but yet so much to learn from your story. And I really appreciate you sharing it. Thank you. Kathy Sirkin discovered unconventional teaching tools in a very unconventional way. The name of her book, The Story of Yanis Gol and Her Journey from Middle School Teacher to the President of a Nonprofit Spreading Communication Tools Around the World, which honestly, Kathy, is as amazing as the book itself.
I was a classroom teacher in a middle school, teaching world cultures, and doing a project at my school that involved engaging all of them to participate in something. And my husband passed me a book to help me, and the book was called The Goal. I read the book. I wrote the author a thank you note. I said, I'm using some of your ideas in my classroom. I hope you don't mind. He called me up. He was an author of a book, but a businessman, and he put me through the business management training. And I began to apply those skills with my students in problem-solving techniques because, as you know, a lot of kids deal with conflict and responsible decision-making, those kinds of things. And they particularly like this conflict tool that's the subject of the first book of the series of Yanis Gol. So when the author of the Goal realized it was doing so well in education, he called me up one day, yes, really, and said, I'm going to create a not-for-profit organization, and it's going to be worldwide, and you're president.
Talk about coming out of left field, huh?
Exactly. But I had been in the classroom 5 years, and it gave me enough intuition to be able to go forward with this. But he gave me this gift of these tools. And my students, they wanted other kids to be able to learn how to do this. It changed the students' attitudes and their ability to make good decisions because it takes the blame out. It's a little diagram that you plot the conflict, and it's replicable, it's generic, and it's visual, but it removes the blame from a conflict. It is like 5 boxes, and it uses a conflict between an action or a want. I want this, you want something else, or sometimes it's internal. And then the next set of boxes are needs, and then there's an objective, a goal. And so it's all explained in the book, but it's very visual in the book. It's well illustrated. But the process was so effective with these students that the parents came to me and said, would you teach us? So in some sense, this is the book for kids and the parents.
And it's the story of Yanis Gol. Yanni learns how to use clouds to solve problems.
But the name of the tool back in the 90s was called the cloud.
So we're talking about real clouds.
It's like evaporating a cloud in your head, you know.
So it is a story. It's not just
yes.
the tools.
No. It's a story. It's a kind of an adventure story about. It starts with a young boy named Yanni who doesn't know how to solve problems, but he has to rescue his queen. She's been taken to the Isle of Hurt, and in order to do that, he has to answer 4 questions. And he goes through a series of several books. They're all standalone, though. And so in each one, he learns a tool to help answer one of these questions. So it is told as a little adventure story. And so they learn this process that's very applicable to every kid's real life, along with the story.
It's like this path was laid out before you, isn't it?
Exactly. And it is, it's obviously I feel very passionate about this. I just want this out there to be shared. This is the first, the story of Yanis Gol is the first conflict book. It's the first in a series of 4.
Well, no doubt you are on to something, Kathy. Thank you. It is time to take a quick break, but we're coming right back. This is the Page Publishing Book Club.
Attention all authors. Page Publishing is looking for authors. Have you written a book and want to get it published? Page Publishing will get your book into bookstores and for sale online at Amazon, Apple iTunes, and other outlets. They handle all aspects of the publishing process for you: printing, cover art, publicity, copyright, and editing. Call 800-204-6099 now for your free author submission kit. That's 800-204-6099 for your free author submission kit.
We're back on the Page Publishing Book Club. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. Andrew Pullman is a business litigation lawyer with 2 teenagers. He had to find free time over several years to do research on time machines, physics, and history in order to put together his book entitled The Laws of Time.
I've always wanted to write a book. The idea for this one came from thinking about it back in, I guess I was in law school at the time, and it really was just staring up at the sun and saying, that light is leaving Earth right now. The light that came from the sun 8.5 minutes ago or whatever is now bouncing off the Earth and it's leaving the Earth. And if I could just be, 200 miles up right now, I would be back in time because that light left earlier than the light that's leaving Earth right now. And so I thought, well, that could be the genesis of a time machine, if somebody could actually travel in a way that did that. And then I thought, well, yeah, but there's got to be a story here. And so I thought, well, I've always been interested in the little guy fighting a huge battle. So I couldn't think of any bigger battle than somebody basically destroying freedom on Earth. Lincoln, of course, at the end of the Gettysburg Address said, government of the people, by the people, for the people shall not perish from the earth. And so I thought, what if there's a story where government of the people does perish from the earth? What if most of the earth is in slavery and the United States is basically under the control of an authoritarian government that gives you the illusion of freedom, but you don't really have freedom? And what if nobody knew that this was not the way the world was supposed to be, except for one person who, against tremendous odds, had to go against this huge organization? So in the 93 time period that I started working through these thoughts, it took me a long time to actually coalesce this into starting writing, which started in earnest in 2013, even though I was researching some of the historical facts before that. So, 20 years of thinking about it, I finally got off my butt and started writing on it. And then it took me 3 years to even get it written. So
you must have the most patient wife on planet Earth.
Oh, she is. But she also knows that this is one of my goals in life. And, it's just like any spouse. If your spouse has a goal in life, you want to support them in doing it. So, and plus, it's not like I didn't go anywhere. I wrote it home, so I was right there. And if she needed me or the kids needed me, I was right there. So there were a lot of picking up the pen and paper and putting them down and going to do other stuff. And that's why it took a long time. The protagonist in the book is a fellow named Aaron Williams. And in the first book, of course, Aaron has to, he's the only one that knows how the Earth should have developed through the 20th century. He's the only one that knows that crime organizations should not be in charge in the United States. He knows that the Axis powers should not have won World War II and taken over the rest of the world. He knows that those things shouldn't have happened, but that's the world as it exists in 2011 when he's a prisoner of this crime organization. Well, so the sequel is Aaron. Now he knows to protect the machine and not let it get in the wrong hands. The problem is Aaron's not the only one who can figure out these principles of time travel. So the second book involves another person figuring out this, and that person having evil motives. And Aaron happened to be the one that basically battles with that other person through use of their time machines to try to keep the world, as Aaron says, the way it should be. So I've reached out to a number of bookstores and other organizations, and some even just Rotary clubs and things like that. And I've got a presentation into the city of Franklin, the south of Nashville. It's to their Rotary club, and I'm looking forward to that. Someone told me that you write a book not to profit, not to make money. You write a book because you should want to do it because that's your desire, just to publish, to be an author. And so through this whole process, that's been my goal, just to become an author. And then, of course, now to try to let people read it. So my best hope for this is just that people looking for a good distraction in an airport, on a train, will say, hey, this looks like a neat story. that I want to read. So I don't have any illusions of it being a bestseller. I would love it if it was, but at the same time, I just want to promote it. And frankly, whether it does well in sales or not, I'm going to be writing the second book because this has now become my hobby. I like doing this, and I like putting a story out there. And who knows, someday the stories may take hold and it may acquire an audience. And we'll just have to see about that.
All right, Andrew. Great attitude. Thank you. Ernest Milam is a welder who decided to keep a diary about the legends of the Mississippi town he grew up in to pass along to his kids. Next thing he knew, he had enough to fill a book. It is entitled The Man Behind the Broom and Where the River Runs White, short story. So what's your favorite story, Ernest?
We have a small school that surrounds, it's in our community, that our community is somewhat built around. The name of it is Topeka Tilton. And we all grew up there. And then years later, we consolidated our schools, and we had to go to one high school in a county. In this particular school, there was several men that had served in the military. I just kind of used that logic that surrounds the hometown heroes, you may say, and built it around it. And in the first book, the book is built around a gentleman that is a retired local guy that was a veteran. His wife passes away. He's a widower, but he's a janitor at a school that his grandchildren, maybe even some of his great-grandchildren, are there. And there's an obtuse situation that surrounds the school there, and he kind of steps up and takes the incentive to protect their hometown investment, you may say. You know, he's a veteran then, and he fought then. Even though he's an old man, he's still willing to fight there, you may say. Now, it's real patriotic. Has a biblical structure around it, kind of a right fight, not picking a fight, but be willing to stand up for something that you love and care for, And also in the book, I had written about a particular school teacher that I had that it was very inspirational, real supportive, kind of just to have an opportunity to reflect on that. I initially didn't start out trying to be, you may say, a best-selling author or an author in general. My intentions was just have a bunch of fun, write it, leave it to my children. And in the process, a couple of friends of mine, they asked to read some of it. So I said, well, I suppose I was a little uncomfortable almost to just give it away because I really didn't think that maybe it would be something that somebody might be interested in reading. So I give it to these 2 or 3 people, and when these people come back to me, they were like, you have to publish this. And I said, well, do you think so? And it's like, yes. I mean, I really enjoyed it. One young lady told me, she said, I literally got beside myself, while reading this. So having said that, I decided maybe start entertaining it. And I'm a prayerful man. I make a point to pray every day. And one particular day, I asked the good Lord for a little help. And as I got to my truck, I cranked my truck, and there was an advertisement on the radio with the Page Publishing program to have some help. And I'd never heard it, this particular radio station I listened to, and I'd never heard the advertisement before. I rushed around, I got the number down, and I carried the number for about 3 or 4 days before I actually got enough nerve to do something like this. And like I say, I'm a multi-craft individual. I've built buildings. I'm an electrician. I'm somewhat of a millwright, a mechanic, work on my own place at my house. I do a list of stuff this long, but when it comes to publishing a book, I was scared to death of it because I'm somewhat illiterate in the steps that need to be taken. And I got with the Page Publishing folks, and they were just really inspirational. Now it's one of the neatest things in the world is to be able to hold a book that you wrote that you really didn't think would ever be possible. I didn't grow up the smart kid in school, and I didn't grow up in, as far as the ace in the English class. I was kind of a little kid sitting in the back and like, oh no, if this class will ever get over with. So if I actually give this book to some of my teachers, it might cause them to have a heart attack because, the magnitude. This kid wrote a book? You've got to be kidding me, But having said that, it's just kind of the way the things worked out. And then actually when I got started doing it, I realized that I enjoyed it. So it would really somewhat become a passion. I pretty much write most every day, something, some fashion.
Well, good for you, Ernest. You found a new calling in life. Thank you. Finally, Matthew Wade is fascinated by the relationship between cartoons and humans, and inspired by movies like Enchanted and Cool World, he envisioned the burgeoning heart of Bambi Bazooms. It kind of reminds me of Who Framed Roger Rabbit. You remember that one?
Yeah, I mean, that's also, of course, one of the big influences. And with this, I was hoping to show to both myself and to others that Roger Rabbit isn't the be-all and end-all of this type of story, and that you can really do a lot with it, especially with the themes of prejudice and the similarities and difference between cartoons and humans. So this story starts out, Bambi is a burlesque dancer in a nightclub in her cartoon neighborhood of McKayville. And one night she meets a human, Steve Warner, gets involved in a romance with him, gets a job as a paralegal courtesy of his friend Reggie, but then also has to not only deal with the relationship with Steve, but also the alienation that causes between herself and her cartoon family.
And how does she handle all of this?
Just by being true to herself, believing that she's doing the right thing, not only in her activism, but also being with Steve, showing that cartoons and humans can get along, and just doing her best to show to both the humans and the cartoons that what she's doing is best for everyone.
I loved some of the names. Her sister, Fanny Firecracker, her friend, Cinnamon Buns. Good
it was a
names.
lot of fun coming up with those.
Yeah.
I would say the moral of the story is prejudice causes much more harm than good. It might seem like it's a good idea to separate people who are so different just because they're either more powerful than you are or the way they act and the way they think is different, but we can learn to accept each other's differences and get along as one big happy family.
And you illustrate that between humans and cartoons, and they don't trust each other, and there's really no reason why. Although you say there's some kind of violence.
Well, yeah, the whole mistrust between humans and cartoons started because a cartoon named Bruno Bison attacked a human in a jazz club way back at the start of McKayville in the 1940s. So because of that, the humans forbid cartoons from entering any human business. But as Bambi points out, most cartoons aren't nearly that violent, and they just want to make people happy.
Are there going to be sequels to this book?
I've brainstormed the sequel to this book already. I've begun taking notes on it. Right now, I've been busy promoting this current book.
What are you doing?
Well, I've been soliciting reviews from online bloggers. I've also had an interview with a friend who runs a website called Adventures in Videoland, so he's hyped me up a little bit and advertised the book on what's called a blog tour, which is like a tour of various book blogs.
Oh, nice, Matthew. Great idea. And I think that's a wrap on this edition of the Page Publishing Book Club. We had a great group on this one, didn't we? And we have more where they came from, trust me. No shortage of authors, but there's still room for you if you just take the time to write it. If you missed a word, head for the podcast at 710WOR.com. Thanks for listening. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini.